impacted there. More crowded audience segments, I'm not shocked that you've seen people fall off these past few months, and that is likely contributing to what you're seeing play out on the Steam charts. But again, two things can be true at once. Are less people playing today than back in March? 100%.
New Shepherd rank achieved.
I do not believe
You have received an endorsement.
before. If you look back to early 2023, there were honestly very similar. We saw earlier this year, there was a sale of the team that came right alongside the as we had today. That was where they did the live program, including a new version of the general franchise of Lost and Borderlands, these resurgence, and so right at that time you saw Steam numbers shoot up to nearly 15,000, but then 2 months later they were down 78%. To be clear, that's not just Steam players, not cycles of frustration, but in general it's more technology. Oftentimes, regardless of the game's going through a good or bad phase. That said, if we get these big ticket items coming, except for DLC, survivors, and the numbers are still low, then 100% I think it would be worth returning to this conversation and talking about why that may be happening. At the beginning of this section, though, I mentioned that the game director had commented on this whole topic. She said 85% down. I'm going to assume that you were referring to maybe Steam numbers. We'll say it again. One last time, Steam is our lowest numbers, and it's definitely not relevant to the health of the game. The majority of PC is on the client. Now, it goes without saying that he's not going to go out there and say, yeah, things are pretty bad right now. But I do just think overall the game has settled back down to where things have been at for this 8-year-old game. And while of course there are improvements to be made, it's vital that we continue giving our feedback, trying to steer the game in the direction to see what improvements are down, not a view of the situation. So, I keep things brief no matter. I'll leave it at that. I'll be very curious to hear your thoughts on it, though, because yeah, this is important to talk about. Well, there you have it, everybody. That is the news. Those are your topics for the day. Of course, not only on the player count topic that we just covered, but on anything that we talked about today, including the AMA. I would love to hear your thoughts on what we've been over. How are you viewing this current season? How are you viewing about where we're heading next? Let me know. I'll read through them all. That's going to do it for me on this one, though. Thank you all so much for coming by and watching. And let's see you next. Now. Oh! We still have this!
Coming up, young man! Yeah.
So now I can feed my kids to their favorite snacks and get a little something back every time I shop. Sign up now and you'll thank me later. This one doesn't just press t-shirts. It also comes with attachments for making mugs, tumblers, hats, and plates, all for one price. And that's not all. It even includes a t-shirt and ready-made designs, so you can start practicing the moment it arrives. It's super easy to use. Just set the temperature and time using the guide it comes with, place your design on the shirt, wait for the beep, and you're done. In just seconds, you'll have a finished t-shirt with a design that won't peel off. This is the push you've been needing to start your own business. This heat press machine basically sells itself. Check out the reviews and you'll see I'm not exaggerating. Start now and take advantage of this amazing promotion. Everything you need is included, so you can get to work right away. It also comes in other colors. Download the Temu app and grab yours now.
Nice shot. Maybe too nice. Hope the memory card's okay.
Thank God that's over.
Another agent has joined your group. Backup arrival confirmed.
Get ready for trouble.
Hostile sniper turret detected.
Inventory.
Here's your reckoning, motherfuckers!
An agent is no longer in your group.
Give that asshole what they deserve.
Vital signs critical.
I'm going around to the side. This asshole needs to die. Shoot him! Those greedy fucks got him. Fuck! I need a better shot.
Get out of here.
I hope this hurts. What now?
Oh, here you go, another group, another group.
Inventory.
Shit!
Got you covered, kid. Take him out.
We've got what we need for the time being. This will let us focus.
Detected. The control point in proximity. Another agent is now in your group. Backup arrived. Another agent has joined your group.
Inventory. Inventory.
Friendly control point nearby.
Chuck me with quivering on it. But get it. Somebody else.
An agent needs assistance.
Got it, boss. See you on the other side.
Those greedy fucks got him.
Detected.
Oh, shit.
Control point. Agent down.
Inventory.
Engine ready! God damn it, I'm in trouble! Fucking hell!
Oh, you bitch.
Serious trauma detected.
Oh, you move up. Can I get some help back here?
Here!
I'm gonna own you.
Shit.
You like that?
Immediate medical assistance needed.
Take them out. Guess you're all mine.
Agent malfunction. Agent deceased.
Put that in your fucking history books!
Think we were too easy.
Fuckers.
Safe area detected.
At the law offices of Peter T. Nicol, we help those injured by medical malpractice. Here's Katina's story.
I went in for a bariatric. Because of so many things are happening with the United States war with Iran and trying to find out how much we can expand and what may be coming next, those are all pertinent questions. But in my view, there is a bigger issue that is not getting anywhere near enough exposure, and it could be far, far more important than just whether there's a war with Iran or how it may get solved, or even the cost of oil, and that is the ramifications of what this war may mean in ways that not very many people are thinking about it. But fortunately, there is one person who's thinking about it, and we have him on our show today. We are very delighted to have back again Mike Adams, also known as the Health Ranger, is founder of all Brighton platforms. BrightonVideos.com is where you'll find some of his information there. He's also a developer and #1 best-selling author of Food Forensics. Mike, we're really glad to have you back today.
Thank you, Daniel. It's always great to be on your show. I'm a fan of your work as well, so I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you very much. It's kind of one of those odd situations where I'm really glad to have you on today, but it's going to be a pretty sobering show here. But we've got some information I think people need to know, because this war has to get over with much more than just what people may think. Just because war itself is bad, it needs to be over, especially when it's not having any positive impact. But this one especially is in a much bigger situation here. Just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about here, probably the two key issues here is, #1, the Strait of Hormuz remains shut. No matter what I don't know why they do this. The U.S. Central Command keeps on posting things. President Trump periodically posted, the strait is open and traffic is fine, and it never is when you look at what's actually going through. And now that it's even more complicated because the Houthis out in the Yemen and the Red Sea area have shut off the Bab al-Mandab, and so now then they've already attacked Saudi shipping already early in this process, which really underscored that and caused the price of oil to go up, and that got a lot of people's attention. But as something you have published a few days ago got my attention even more than that, this is this article you wrote called "Trump's War on Iran is a War on Global Food Security," and here's the math to prove it. And that really got my attention here, because the article opens up by saying the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran has affected the closest Strait of Hormuz,
Nice to
and the
see you.
mainstream media is treating this as a geopolitical story about oil price and naval posturing. They are missing the real story, the coming famine. So can you just first of all tell us what prompted you to write this story? What do you mean by the coming famine? You didn't write the possible coming famine.
Yeah, it's baked in at this point. So let me just establish a little bit of background in case your viewers don't know my background. Known as the Health Ranger, and I run a mass spec food laboratory, a very large lab in Central Texas. I'm the founder, and I'm a published food scientist, and also my company, Health Ranger Store, imports food from all over the world.
I'm gonna
and
need
then we
more
test it in
storage.
our own lab. That's kind of what we're known
That
for.
was a
But
great deal
we
for both
are very
of
much
us.
aware of food supply chains and international providers of food, and some of the stresses on the system that are happening right now, delays, crop failures as they occur. We will know about them ahead of everybody else, or I should say ahead of retail consumers.
Yeah.
So what I'm an AI developer, so I unleashed a bunch of AI agents the other day to do some research on this, and I was asking the question: what percent of the total world fertilizer production actually comes out of the Persian Gulf? Now, if you just consider the seaborne traded fertilizer, that's about 30%. But compared to the total fertilizer of the world, which feeds about 4 billion people, or half the human population, the amount that comes out of the Persian Gulf is, according to my research, from 8 to 12%. So I just went with a 10% number because that's right in the middle, easy to work with. So if you say that 10% of half the world's population depends on the Strait of Hormuz in order to be able to eat because of the fertilizer outputs, which we could talk about how nitrogen, how ammonia is produced from the Haber-Bosch process, which uses natural gas for reasons involving chemistry. We can get into that if you want, but the result is that really 400 million people in the world are at risk of famine because of the continued failure of this war, of Trump's war on Iran. And importantly, Daniel, those 400 million people are largely not located in the United States or Canada or the UK or other typical Western nations. Those 400 million people tend to be located in what we would call the global South. So that represents about 5% of the human population that will be facing food scarcity. And not all 400 million people are suddenly going to have nothing to eat. There will be food redistribution. There will be social pressures. There will be sort of shared famine where a much larger number of people will have a lot less to eat. And the ramifications of this are dire, one of those being mass human migration to the north. So what Trump is actually unleashing, as much as he says he's trying to stop, illegal migration into the United States, he's actually unleashing global conditions that will lead to massive, what Michael Young calls human autonomic pressure. People leaving countries like Bangladesh or India or Yemen or Somalia or maybe even, Egypt in some cases and countries in Central and South America, looking for wealthier nations where they won't starve to death. So we need to talk about, and I think that's why you had me on, we need to talk about what's going to unleash in terms of the social implications.
Yeah, and I do actually want to start with that Haber-Bosch process, which we have on the screen here, because you say it is not some obscure industrial footnote. It is the single most important chemical reaction for human survival. Can you explain to us a little bit so we have some idea of what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So Haber-Bosch describes a process where you take atmospheric nitrogen. And remember, the atmosphere is about 79% nitrogen, but it's bound up tightly as N2, so it's nitrogen and nitrogen. And plants ordinarily can't access that nitrogen from the air because it's bound up. So you have to separate the nitrogen, and you have to form a nitrogen compound, which is ammonia. NH3 is one of the easiest to produce from this process. But in order to do that, you have to subject atmospheric nitrogen to hundreds of atmospheres of pressure and extremely high heat. And the only way to do that is to use an abundant economical form of energy, such as natural gas. So gas that comes out of the Persian Gulf, or previously that came out of Russia and went into Germany before the Nord Stream pipelines were destroyed, the German company BASF used to manufacture a large volume of ammonia and then downstream products such as urea or various nitrogenous fertilizers. And the gas that comes out of the Gulf, some of that gas is consumed right there in the Haber-Bosch process in the various facilities that surround the Persian Gulf region in order to export things like ammonia or urea or nitrogenous fertilizers, which is a completely separate path from phosphate-based fertilizers, which uses sulfuric acid that comes out of the oil. We could talk about that separately. But the bottom line is, our world today has built an infrastructure over the last, let's say, 70 years or so that supports the feeding of 8 billion people, whereas about half of those 8 billion people are only able to eat because of Haber-Bosch. So that's why it's the single most important chemical process that keeps humanity alive as we know it today.
I wanted to ask you about that. So how long has that been in effect? Because my understanding is that the only reason we can have 8 billion people is because prior to this, the food supply wouldn't support that many people. So that was one of the reasons there weren't more. But now that we have it, we can support more, but only as long as we have it. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So if the infrastructure of creating synthetic fertilizers shrinks or contracts, then population will have to contract to reach homeostasis with the available infrastructure. Now, before Haber-Bosch, which they were German scientists, and I think it was around the 1917 or something, and then there was it was development over a few decades, but this came out of German innovation, World War I and World War II era. Okay, and the German scientists, Berlin was the centerpiece of scientific genius in many areas, chemistry and physics at the time. And this process was necessary because the world was running out of fertilizer, because before that they were literally scraping like bird poop off of islands to feed the British people, to fertilize the crops to feed the British people. Or they were using manure, right? So you can take a lot of farmland and you can use horse manure and what have you, cow manure, it's a messy business, but you can grow some amount of food, but you can't grow enough food to feed 8 billion people. So if we have to go back to the animal manure days or the bird poop days, and pretty much most of the bird poop was already harvested, taken off the islands, then our world population may only support 2 billion people, maybe 4 billion if we're lucky, right? And that's why it's said that synthetic fertilizer feeds half the world's population. That's a pretty conservative number. Some other economists would say, no, we're going to collapse down to 2 billion.
So help people understand, because if those who are not scientists in this arena, they think, well, hang on, okay, so you don't have as many fertilizer, we'll use something else, but we have the farmland, and we can still keep growing on the farmland. But you're saying it's not a matter of the acreage that you can farm, but it's this other thing. How does that manifest physically on a crop?
Well, yeah, right. It's the acreage will only produce crops based on the inputs, especially when that same land has been used for many, many years. It doesn't have any natural fertilizer in it anymore, and you have to add the inputs, N, P, and K, right? But if you go back to ancient Egypt or Roman times, etc., like the River Nile, they depended on the flooding of the river to bring fresh nutrients in. And then you would have record crops the year after the flood. So flooding was a natural process to redistribute trace minerals as well as nitrogen and phosphorus compounds. That was natural fertilizer. If you didn't have the flood, you didn't have the crop yields. Same thing is true today, except we've built a population that needs enough food, that needs synthetic fertilizers in order to function. So if the Persian Gulf stops functioning, we lose about 10% of the global fertilizer production, which puts, like I said, about 5% of the current human population at extreme risk of food scarcity.
Now, that leads into one of the next points you make.
You don't leave that many people guarding an empty building.
So, whereas with oil,
here for something.
Recent aerial footage shows some chemical spillage on the east side and some Rikers activity on the north. This may be related to Keener's bioweapon.
Scope them both. We'll get to the bottom of this.
We can't let Dragov's supplies get to Keener.
Assuming they haven't made it to him already. Hopefully we'll...
Exothermic reaction initiated.
Yes, because of growing and harvesting seasons. Right now, in America, for example, we are eating food that was planted last year. Some of it's being harvested now from the spring. The spring here in North America, most farmers were able to bring fertilizer into those wasn't, we were just barely.
Vital signs critical.
At that time. Very harsh. The shortages happened yet when they kicked in. But all of that changed for the northern hemisphere. Europe,
Chemical pressure released.
China, Russia, all of that. But all planting seasons are going to be especially difficult. Fertilizer prices will be higher. Fertilizer sourcing will be impacted. About 5% of the world's population that will essentially have no access to food. But I'm not saying it's 100%. It's 5%. But the pressures from that will not be felt until the result of the fall planting season and the harvest that follow, which in some countries the harvest begin in like November or December. But in 2027 is when things really kick off. That's when we're going to really see the shortages, and Daniel, the thing that's going to make it far worse is that diesel scarcity will be a factor in North America at the same time. So you're going to have much higher diesel prices, and transportation is a major cost component of food.
I hate to break in on this little party, but I finished some more analysis of Isaac's data from the Wall Street compound. It's not good. Use cases include aerosol dispersal mechanisms and cultures for growing viruses.
If you need a
Dragov's
different
helping
chemical
Keener
ratio,
with his bioweapon. We need to shut this whole operation down. Agent, secure the north side of that field. Any supplies the Rikers are prepping to send need to go up in smoke. Do not, I repeat, do not let the Rikers get those supplies off the dock.
under control.
The shelves that aren't stocked as deeply as they are today. That's what we're facing.
And if the war magically ends tomorrow, and the spring starts to open back up, how is that going to place later in the future? So let's say that it did. If that's the case, how much trouble of the kind you're talking about
one growing season is already baked in. So what are we, 5 months into the war, give or take? So roughly that's one growing season. That's already baked in, it's already done. We will face food scarcity, we will face food inflation.
An agent needs assistance.
A fertilizer crisis. If this continues for another, let's say 6 months, or to the end of this year, that's when things become really catastrophic. So, think about it. Societies can redistribute a certain amount of food over a period of time. You can't lose calories forever. At some point, you'll suffer so much and die-offs, immune systems are compromised, etc. That's where we start to get really concerned. So my prediction is that you'll see, the IMF or UN or food aid organizations really putting out the call for emergency food supplies, emergency fundraising, beginning in the spring of 2027. And throughout the summer of 27, one of the main stories that we will be seeing, no doubt you'll be covering it, is the food panic in these other countries and the mass human migration that's setting off, which is going to create all kinds of cost pressures and the societal pressures across Western Europe, for example, or even in the United States, because there's going to be this massive migration wave from the south.
Okay, so where do you project because you say only 5% of the population, and people think, okay, it's a globe of 8 billion people, but you're saying it's not generally dispersed around the globe. It's going to be localized in some places that are especially vulnerable, which I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's where this migration would originate from. Where are those countries that you're most concerned about?
Yeah, you're correct. So some of those countries are Bangladesh, India to some extent.
Fuel pump detected.
I mentioned Somalia, Nigeria, Yemen, and in Central and South America, especially in South America, there are countries
Fuel pump activated.
Food scarcity.
I like the way you think, Agent. When that barge is flooded with fuel, it'll be gone in no time.
UN organizations right now, the WHO, they will tell you right now where there are countries that are on the edge. For example, every year, so much worse. I'm not even sure. Think about the United States. We're going to be suffering reduced crop yields, not mass starvation, but there's not going to be this abundance. What would be the political and the economic will of the Trump administration to save people responsible for extra food supply? Probably that's giant strategic food reserve. It doesn't exist. There are small food reserves, but just like the oil reserves, they're going to be drawn down and they're going to run out.
So with these countries where it's going to be, there's going to be a hard hit because there's not going to be, we're going to be already in a scarcity time and a high price, so we're not going to have a lot of extra sit out. Presumably that's going to be the case in Europe as well. What, you mentioned earlier that you have some concerns about migration.
Solid work there, Agent. We've just put a large dent in Keener's bioweapon production. He may believe he's got this wrapped up, but he's got another thing coming.
I'm not so sure. He's had plenty of time to work on this. We may need some outside help, but for now, this is a big win for us.
Wherever family gets very bad, then people will voluntarily leave to seek survival in what they perceive as a wealthier country, which tends to be countries more to the north. So there will be people in the Middle East. Well, let's start with Africa. People are going to, sail across, and they're going to go right into Morocco and Spain, and ultimately Italy and Greece and wherever. The European right now, a lot of European countries are concerned about so-called invasions from sub-Saharan Africa or parts of the Middle East. That's going to be so much worse because of the famine. And then, what about hungry people in India? Subsidized fertilizer across India to make food affordable. It's very difficult to feed 1.3 billion people, or maybe that number is higher now, especially in a global scarcity scenario. So you're going to see migration. You're going to see people trying to, even Southeast Asia, they may try to get into China, where they perceive there's more food in China. Russia is actually relatively well positioned compared to most other countries because Russia is more self-reliant and self-contained. Russia has its own fertilizer and phosphate production, and it has its own very mature agricultural system. Plus, the Russian people have a mindset of preparedness and being ready for harsh winters in much of Russia, obviously. So Russia's probably going to be the best in all of this. The United States is going to suffer a lot of migration pressure, and there's going to be a lot of domestic unhappiness because of the unaffordability of food for Americans who vote. So one of the things that I think is going to hit the GOP very sharply, not just in these coming midterms, but probably in 2028, is that Trump will be blamed, I think, for causing these global conditions that make food unaffordable and also energy and fuel much more expensive for those who can afford it. So there's quite a social backlash coming in there.
And what about China? You talked about Russia. What with China? You talked a little about India too. They're obviously quite large. How are they going to be stacked up since they're a definite net importer of all petroleum products? How does that work on their agriculture?
Well, China has a lot of foresight, so of course they have massive petroleum reserves.
Enemy contact!
Like we're approaching. Same thing with food. So China has stockpiled a massive amount of wheat and soy and rice, and they will be eating into those supplies. China's probably better positioned than almost any other country other than Russia.
Hostiles regarding location nearby.
Eventually, China will either have to pay higher prices to outbid food supplies from countries that are producing it. And that's going to get difficult because the energy shock will reduce yields, and fertilizer shock will reduce yields in countries that are net producers and exporters of food. And on top of that, the United States, China depends on the U.S. for a lot of food exports, and all of those crop yields are going to be affected in the U.S. as well. So China, of course, has a top-down control system. China's not known for having, grassroots riots. China's not going to have probably, an angry popular revolt or anything like that. But they will spread the suffering if necessary across the people, and the people will endure. So, China's going to make it through, but a lot of Western countries may face social upheaval.
Yeah, a lot of these
detected nearby location
ways we've
guarded
been
by
operating,
hostiles.
the expectation and the sense of entitlement we've had, I think, is not going to do well for us when scarcity hits just by itself. I think we're going to learn that.
The other thing, you don't mind me pointing out, Daniel, the fact that food will become more scarce and far more expensive makes home food production much more lucrative. Whereas before, when people would home garden, you know, you could spend a fortune. You could grow the world's most expensive tomatoes, right? That were way more expensive than what you could buy in the grocery store. But all of these factors that you and I are discussing are going to turn that upside down, and there will be a resurgence of, you know, victory gardens, as we used to talk about in this country back in World War II. Victory gardens, which would be decentralization.
We're gonna get. Well, no, let's just go ahead and get to it now. Okay, so about to talk about it. But I know one of the things that I guess one of your companies do, or one of your services, is that you help people figure out how to
Vital signs critical.
Out, and whether it's emergency supplies or whatever. What and from now, if people recognize what's coming, maybe even in a year from now, already baked in, much less if the war goes on. What can people do right now to ride this out more effectively later?
Okay, sure. Well, and if you don't mind, my main video site, videos.com, that's where people can follow me, and I put a lot of how-to information there. But one of the main things people can do is start composting today. Because compost, I call it black gold. Compost needs to age. You need the microbiological activity. That is actually food potential. So
Another agent has endorsed you.
Kitchen scraps or
Hostile
whatever,
control point
and
detected.
start building a compost pile. You'll need it in 2027 because it'll help you grow more effectively. The second thing you can do is you can actually go to a feed store right now. You can purchase fertilizer